Ciao friends! In this Unplugged video, I'm going to do something unusual, which in reality is in the true spirit of the Unplugged videos. Yesterday night, OpenAI released ChatGPT-4, and I'm going to use ChatGPT-4 to write DAX code and to comment, of course, whether there will be errors or not, and I will try also to fix the code or to ask ChatGPT to fix the code if in case it is wrong. I didn't prepare anything before, there is no script, I really don't know what is going to happen, and I will not cut anything. This is a promise for the Unplugged video. So let's start. Okay, let's start. We have ChatGPT window ready here with the new model ChatGPT-4, you see here. And we had a previous conversation that I tried with the previous versions of ChatGPT. So these are internal tests I made, but I didn't prepare anything for today. And I also have a Contoso model in Power BI Desktop in case I want to try the measures. So this is what I have, and I will also, well, one consideration before starting. This website, DAX Patterns, is a website we have. There are many patterns, and I might want to ask something, and also to compare the answer of ChatGPT compared to what is public on the web from the website, in case it is just doing copy and paste from our website. But I have no idea, to be honest. So let's start with something simple. So also notice that I have a limit, 100 messages every 4 hours, which means that we will not go too long with this Unplugged video, because if we go over the 100 messages, probably is too much, but we have plenty of time. So let's start with the, do you know DAX? This is just to make sure if the playground is ready. He's familiar with DAX, and this is what is the meaning of DAX, data analysis expression, use it in Power BI, analysis services, Power Pivot for Excel. It's something I've wrote a lot of times, but anyway. Okay, so it's taking a while to write. Maybe that I have to ask to write shorter queries from now on. So let's say, from now on, please use a short answer. Can you give me the year-to-date, let's start with something simple, year-to-date calculation of sales amount. So this way I'm providing sales amount, which is a measure we have in Contoso, and let's see if it is able to create a year-to-date calculation with the correct evaluation of sales amount. So, well, in this case, you see that the first interesting consideration is that I provided sales amount without specifying it was a measure or not, and sales has been used as the name of the table, whereas amount has been used as the name of the column. So this expression calculates the sum of sales amount, which in reality is just amount of the sales table. But by the way, I mean, it seems correct, so I don't want to try it, but let's see if I can fix the code, because I don't have a column amount in sales table. I have a measure called sales amount. And let's see if it fixes the code. And this is what I have. I have a measure called sales amount. You can create a new measure for the year-to-date calculation using the measure. Here's the DAX expression. And here we go. This works. I think this works. So copy the code. And let's create a measure in Power BI Desktop. So I just copy and pasted the code as it is. I didn't change anything. So I click OK, and I move the measure here. Let's also use the decimal. And this is a pretty much, I mean, this is pretty good. But of course, consider this, we're using the model Contoso, which is the same model used in all the examples on the internet. So it doesn't surprise me that it knows the name of the table, it knows the date table. So, but so far so good. I mean, this is a good start. Okay, now let's do, can you write calculation for the last 4 weeks, excluding, okay, now let's start with the 4 weeks, because my idea is that if I start using the weeks, there is a limitation for the time intelligence, and maybe that there will be some, I mean, there are different patterns for that, but let's see what happens at this point, because I start to inject something that can be computed for this question. I just want the last 4 weeks. We don't have the week as as an entity in the time intelligence functions, but and here it is. So that's the thing. Dates in period doesn't have week. Dates in period only supports. We can check if I go to DAX guide and dates in period. This is the first hallucination we see today because the interval we have supports, I think is written here. So the interval, that is the last parameter, is day, month, quarter, year. The week is not supported, and it's one of the issues of the standard time intelligence functions in DAX. So there is no way this code is going to work. So at this point, I say, okay, week is not available in the periods of dates in period, in the period parameter. I try to provide instructions. So, and he was confused. It apologizes. He or she, I don't know. It is better. And let's see what happens at this point. So now in course, it will multiply minus 28 days. So that's good. I mean, it considered that the week is 7 days, and it made the multiplication. If you know about ChatGPT and ability to do arithmetic calculations, is not so trivial. So it's also possible that it found this solution somewhere else. 4 weeks is 20 days. I'm thinking whether if we try to ask for 13 weeks, please rewrite using 13 weeks. The idea is that if it is copying the pattern, 4 weeks is a pretty standard calculation. 13 weeks is probably not. So in order to transform 4 weeks to 28 to 13 weeks, it has to do the good calculation from an arithmetical perspective. And 91 is good. 91 is the right answer. So this part is good. So let's try. Let's copy the code just to see whether it misses something. So now I create a new measure with the new code. CSML last 13 weeks. Let's check this and move this here and also use the decimal. And it works. That's good. I think this is good. We should investigate why 2020 is not 2020 is not working because it is getting the last 13 weeks of 2020, and in 2020 we don't have 13 weeks. So I trust that the code is working. I don't want to check the numbers, but I know that the code is good. Now I know that there is a problem in DAX, and this is something that it's not easy to understand for ChatGPT. Maybe what happens if I ask to ignore the holidays and the weekends? So remove the, let's say, the weekends, only consider working days in the calculation. So this has a number of implications because working days is something that we can detect from the calendar, or it could be an attribute that we stored in the date table. So I have no idea about what it's going to do. He chose to use Monday to Friday, and this is getting weird. So it's filtering the dates. Let me think. This is an interesting idea. So dates in period. So I'm thinking. So dates in period is working because it removes from the filter content anything. So if we write a measure that in an explicit way asks for that, that's a possible solution. This is not the solution I would have used, but actually it works, I think. So let's try. So let's get this one. I'm thinking how I can test this, if this is working or not. I have to think about that. To be honest, it seems good enough because, I mean, it is not performing well, but beside the performance, so weekday is retrieving the day of the week. I have to check the second argument. So let's go in DAX guide and weekday. I don't remember the Monday to Sunday. So the argument, the second argument that it is using too, number 1 to 7, and this is correct, because greater than or equal to 1 means Monday, and less than or equal to 5 means Friday. So the condition is correct. This would be only filtering Monday to Friday, and so it should work. So let's just test it. So this is the measure I want to test, and let's move forward. Okay, so let's fix the format. So we have a number. The number is smaller because, of course, we are removing we're only considering the working days. I mean, what is not correct is what happens if we filter, but I think this is too much. If I used a filter over if I use a slicer where I filter the weekdays, keeping the filter over the weekdays with this structure is almost impossible. I will not ask this to a human, so I don't know if asking this to ChatGPT works, but let's try. I expect an error in this case. So rewrite the original last 13 weeks formula by considering the existing filter over a column, over the column date. Let's see how it is called in our model. Day of week. Day of week. So that we compare only the days selected. The weekday selected. This should be, I think, so what I want to do is, okay, let's go to the report. I remove a few of these measures. My goal is the following. Let's say that I have a slicer with the day of the week. So the day of the week is a slicer, and I increase the font size of this. So let's enlarge the font size. Let's use 24. This one, 24. Okay, so if I select here Monday to Friday, I basically obtain the same calculation that ChatGPT computed in the last 13 weeks. And now I want to obtain the last 13 weeks using this filter. So let's see if it works. So let's ask ChatGPT to write the DAX code. This is complex because it should create, it should detect the existing filters and reapply the filter later. And it's complex. I'm curious to see what is the solution that it tries to find. Aha. This is interesting. I'm quite impressed because this is another good approach, because what it's doing is the following. So the contains, once again, it is not using the best DAX syntax, but I mean, if it works, who cares? So basically what it's doing is, it is creating the list of the last 91 days, and then it is filtering this list by considering the existing selection of day of week. So day of week, if I selected only 5 days of the week, it looked for the same day of the week in the existing selection that it retrieved from this filter. Now the problem of this of this approach is that it is not going to work because dates in period returns only one column, date. So if the filter was over date and dates in period was used to filter date, that would have worked. But of course, this is not going to work. So let's try to copy the code. Let's see the error. Oh, now it starts to be interesting. So we have a good idea with a bad implementation. And by the way, of course, we have this error because in this case, the row context generated by this table doesn't have the day of the week because we are iterating only date. Okay, so let's see what is the error. So let's, I don't know if I can copy this error. Let's see. Can I copy this error? Okay, let's try to write it. I don't know. Okay. I tried the formula, but I get an error saying a single value for column day of week in table date cannot be determined. What should I do? And let's see what happens at this point. And finally tries the other day, weak column in the date table without proper row context. This is good. To fix this issue, we can use calculate table function along with summarize to establish proper context. This not sure about what he's trying to do, but let's see. I think that the problem will exist because it's missing, completely missing the idea that the first table should iterate over date, and so it probably connected some information, some message in some forum, and it is trying to solve this in a different way, but there is no way this is going to work because it is completely missing the point in this case. It is using summarize to obtain the set that before we had values, day of week. And this is not the problem. The problem is the third argument. And this will produce the same error. So we can copy the code, but I know that we will get the same error. So I paste the code in DAX Studio. You see the same error in, oh, but we have a different error. So let's see what, let's continue to provide the errors. Let's see what happens. So now the error is earlier earliest refers to an earlier row context which doesn't exist. And I'm interesting because now it's going completely random now. Let's use intersect. Let's see what happens. This is, oh, maybe it's a good idea, by the way. Maybe it's a good idea. This is completely, now it completely lost the direction. It doesn't have any idea about what it's doing. So, yeah, this is not going to work. He has no idea. So let me explain. In this case, intersect can potentially work, but in terms of syntax. So this will not generate an error, but it will not generate the good result. If I copy the code and I paste the code here, you see that I have no error. I can confirm this measure. I get a number, but this is simply a wrong number. So if I, let's see, where is this measure? 13 weeks, which one? Weekdays, this one. I had to use a shorter name, working days, weekdays is this one. Okay, so this is the measure. If I include this measure, I have the number here with the last 13 weeks, but the problem is that, yeah, the problem is that this number is still considered. So if I change the day of the week, you see that we actually have a change because it changes the values. Let me think. So let's explore a smaller period. So for example, if we go to June, let me reduce the size of this measure so that we have a shorter sales 13 weeks. So we have a shorter name here. We can compare this and then we can also look at the number. So the idea is the following. So if I select these days, I'm actually selecting only 5 days per week. So of course, for a single day it doesn't change. For a month, I have only the working days in May. And from the point of view of May, asking for the last 13 weeks, of course, includes the entire month. Now, if we go to the following month, though, because we are asking for the last 13 weeks, which is basically a quarter, the value we see in June should include May. But the idea that ChatGPT had, or I don't know if it had or just tried, so values date only has working days, and this is correct. What is not correct is that, first of all, there could be only a fraction of the selected working days. The right thing to do would have been to get filters to retrieve the selection from the slicer and use that result to filter the working days of the result of the same period. That was the right solution. So actually the idea of using contains at the beginning was not bad, but instead of using values, it should have used something else. and it failed in doing this. So now it is going in a completely wrong direction. Because it is using values and it is using the filter context, it is also reducing the list of the dates used here, because intersect will get only the intersection of the two sets. And when you are in June only include June dates, and this exclude the others. So it is not going to working, and of course it's not testing in a proper way the working days. So I don't know. So I don't know if I should play the role of the teacher or the role of the user. So let's try to do the teacher. Let's see if I can teach ChatGPT how to fix this code. So let's say, okay, you cannot use intersect this way because you reduce the filter. You reduce the selected dates to those existing in the filter context by using values. Probably your initial attempt was better, but you should have iterated the date table instead of the date column. I don't ask anything. I want to see the reaction about this correction. You're correct. I apologize. Let's revise the DAX expression to iterate the date table using the SumX function. Oh, this is another good, not good. I don't think it is good. I think that it is strange because this is assuming that the sales amount is an additive measure, which in this case is correct. So that could be, okay, let's evaluate if it works. So in the meantime that he explains the answer, let me copy the code into the measure, says 13 weeks. I created here. So I paste the code and I just remove the name. So I keep the say 13 weeks. So let's see the explanation. The explanation is if we use a SumX to iterate over the filter dates in the last 13 weeks and calculate sales amount for each date that is also inserted weekdays. Replace date and day of week. Okay, so the formula in this case, so now let me think what he did. So as you see, the formula is producing a wrong number because now the result is always the same for every cell, for every month, for every year, and actually it's quite confusing, to be honest, because it's probably the last 13 weeks for the current selection. For I have to, okay, let me see what it wrote. So dates in period is always the same, and this would be correct. The problem is that it should filter those dates that are working days, and it is trying to use contains. So the problem is that it is still iterating the date column in the date table. So it is not filtering the date table. It is filtering the date column in the date table. So it is not changing. And contains uses values, day of week, with day of week that exist in this table. But again, now it is using in the second argument the calculate max of day of week. Yeah, it is getting the last value of day of week, which is a string. So it is getting the last string in the current filter content that is visible, and it is checking whether this value is in this list of day of week. It completely doesn't make any sense. I'm not sure I can help him, but I think we are in a. I knew that this was a difficult problem, so let's try. So I could continue, but to be honest, it would be at this point a little bit boring. So let's try to change completely, to change the topic. As I said, I have several patterns published on daxpatterns.com. And for example, one popular one is the new returning customer. New returning customer is a very popular one. So let's try to ask for, let's see, because we have different formulas for the returning customer. So let's let's see. But I mean, the returning customer it's a hard problem. So let's start with the new customer, which is easier. So let's ask, okay, it doesn't work, but I have another requirement now. Compute the sales amount of the new customers for the selected period. The U, I don't know, but probably it will understand the same. To compute the sales amount with a set period, for you can create a new measure following using the following DAX expression. Oh, this is going to be complex. Wow. This is a copy and paste from very bad code, by the way. This is very slow. If I write this code, it will take minutes, assuming that it works. So let's see if the code works first. And so I copy the code, and now we create a new measure. I copy the code. And first of all, we have, of course, customer ID is not correct because we have customer key in this case. And customer key in this case. This is order date with a space, but pretty much it's the same because Contoso, AdventureWorks, these are very, very similar databases that we can find on internet. So it doesn't surprise me that it is using the very similar columns. So what it's doing is the following. So it is filtering all the customers. Customer by customer is computing whether the number of rows in the sales table for that customer is equal to 0 because okay, so it is considering, okay, it is filtering those sales before the minimum date in the current period. This is correct. So it is going in the past, and it is removing the filter from the date table here. And so it's very expensive. So it is getting all the transactions in the sales table. Then it is considering only those that have the current customer, which is totally useless because the context transition obtained by this calculation will already satisfy this condition. So it is using earlier, it is absolutely unnecessary in this case. This condition could be removed, but it doesn't hurt, it's just slower. And it is filtering order date less than min of date. Now the problem, okay, no, the problem is the following. So by removing date here, it is considering all the transactions in the past and in the future for the current customer. So this is working. The problem is that the way it is applying the filter, it will be very slow. I'm worried that this measure will be too slow, but potentially it could work because at the end, the result of the filter is a list of customers, and these customers are used to filter a sales amount. Now, one thing that I don't like at all is that it is using all here, because the problem is that if I have the customer in the report, for example, the customer country, this will be ignored and removed. So I'm just worried about the time. So let's try. So let's remove this measure, and let's try the sales amount. Let's fix this one first, and let's see what happens. Of course, I could have removed the day of week at this point, and you see the spinning wheel. Let's see if I can show this better. Oops. There we go. This is gonna take a while because actually I didn't expect such a bad query. This is taking too much. So let's try to inform ChatGPT that this is very slow. So I wrote the measure, but it's very slow. Oh, by the way, in the meantime, the measure completed. So we informed ChatGPT. In the meantime, I obtained the result. But as you see, the result is, I would say, strange because in 2010, we have all new customers. In 2011, we have only a fraction. So actually, it is filtering something. But as I said, the problem is that if I filter, for example, Canada, this will not work. I just don't want to spend so much time now. But let's see what is the suggestion now. So I apologize for a performance issue. Let's optimize the measure for improve this calculation speed using variables and the accept function. Okay, so it is getting a minimum and the maximum of the date, and it is getting customer before selection, calculate table. So this is correct, I'm thinking. If we remove the date and we get the customer ID, it is not removing other filter, it is using values, so this makes sense. So this customer before selection makes sense. Customers in selection. This is a nonsense. I mean, you could have used just value says customer ID. Why doing this? It's just, I mean, it's just useless, but it should work. It should work, yes. In customer in selection, intersected with customer before selection, will provide the customers, and then it check customer ID in new customers. So also in this case, you could have used just the variable, but this should work. This should work. It's not optimal, but this should work, and it is better than the previous one. So let's try. By the way, let's compare the numbers. So let's, oh no, if I compare the number, this will be executed again. So no, I don't want to do that. No, I started the measure again. That's a bad idea. Can I stop it? No. Okay, it will take a few seconds. Now what? I can accelerate this. And here we go. Now we have the error. So let's remove this measure that is very slow. And let's create a measure that ChatGPT provided me. As usual, I have to replace customer ID with customer key, order date, customer key, order date, and customer key. Okay, probably I could ask to ChatGPT to do the replacement for me, but let's see if this works. Choose a different name. Say customer T2. And let's try. It's not too fast. Let's see what happens. I'm thinking, yes, because this calculation is still requiring time. Remember, we have maybe I didn't specify. This is a model. It has 10 million rows, so we have something like 20, 25 million rows in the sales table. So this is the number of transactions. It is quite slow, to be honest. I would have expected to be faster. So let's comment the code a little bit while we wait for the answer. Yeah, pretty much is what we have seen before. So we see the numbers, and the numbers make me think, yeah, the previous calculation would have worked if I, so the advantage of this version is the following. It is faster when we use a filter over customer country. So if I filter, for example, a country, so let's move the country here, and let's select only, well, a small one. I think Canada and Italy should be small in terms of number of rows. And you see that when I selected Italy, the performance was extremely fast in providing the result. So now when I select everything, it repeats the query that takes several seconds. But with Italy, the number is good. If I choose Netherlands, the performance should be relatively good because we have a smaller number of customers, and the number of customers is what drives the calculation. So performance is not optimal, but this is a complex problem. The good thing is that, I don't know if it is good or not, but it is not using the solution we have in DAX patterns, because that solution would have been much, much faster, but it clearly is more complex probably to implement because it requires some deeper analysis. Maybe that this is an example we use to introduce the intersect accept functions. So I would not be surprised if I ask the returning customer, I would not be surprised of using the same code with intersect instead of accept. So let's try. Change, okay, now provide the sales amount of returning customers. So let's see what is the answer. Potentially it is the same code with just intersect instead of accept. But it's possible that it produces a completely different code. I have no idea. But by the way, so while it writes, I'm quite surprised because I made a few tests with ChatGPT 3.5 and it failed in a much bigger way before. And more important, it was very arrogant. So it was trying to assert that the code was right and it was something else that was not working and something like that. Now it seems reasonable. It seems suggesting this, and it is using intersect. So you see the pattern is the same. So it probably is using the same sample of data. By the way, in my model, I want to see if it renames the columns correctly. Customer ID is called the customer key, and sales order date is a sales order date. Can you fix the code? And we see what happens. And probably I'm consuming the messages today with this stupid question. So, okay, so the returning customer is a good test, I would say. As usual, the problem is that when there is a failure in the calculation, it doesn't warn you. And if you try to provide the description of what is happening, as soon as it enters into an area, into a space where there are no suggestions, no examples, it is completely lost, as we have seen before. This is my impression. Oh, it is rewriting both. Why? This is nice. So I didn't ask for a specific one, so it is rewriting both a returning customer and new customer. Quite nice. So I would think about using this for refactoring code if it is able to correctly determine the syntax. Of course, tabular editor is faster, but this is actually this is not free. We paid because in order to have access to ChatGPT-4 at the moment, you have to get the subscription to ChatGPT. But I cannot resist, so I was not able to resist yesterday. So I said, okay, let's here are my money, and now I can test. So that's fine. So what else? Let's see a last example. Let's see something more difficult. So I want to use the DAX pattern because they are common problems. And for example, something that is relatively easy to describe, because the basket analysis could be complex. The events in progress is something that we use. So events in progress is the pattern that we use for example, how many open orders I have a certain date, something like that. Also, this calculation is subject to performance issues if you don't do the right thing. So we can ask for the open orders for my model. So, okay, now I need a measure to compute the number of open orders in the selected period. Now, the thing is that the notion of open order is ambiguous, because what does it mean? If I have a month, should we include the orders that were open at the beginning of the month, at the end of the month, that have been open and closed during the month? Or so there are a number of conditions that we have to evaluate. It is not asking me anything, and I think that this is the biggest limitation. So the prompt should be very clear and accurate in order to specify what we want. But we can start with this relatively simple. In this case, the problem is the following: that status open is a column we don't have, right? So the engine is assuming that the sales table has a status, but the status is something. Think about this. This model is impossible because if you have the status is something that changes over time. So the status in a table sales will be the status we have as of today. If we have a status that changes over time, we should have a snapshot, but it's using order date. So from whatever perspective we want to see this code it cannot work. Now I will try to say that we don't have a sales status column, and we have to evaluate the status of the order based on the combination of order date and delivery date. So we see that we can try this. So in my model, I don't have sales status, and I should evaluate the status of an order based on the analysis of sales order date and sales delivery date. Okay, so with the minimal amount of information, let's see what happens. Yes, I want to do this. I want to compute the number of open orders based on sales order date and sales delivery date. That's correct. And let's see what happens. So count rows. I'm trying to think why I see that is blank. Okay, if it is blank, so if delivery date is blank, it means that the order is still open because it has not been delivered, or the delivery date is in the future. In the future compared to the max date. So this means that if we are in February, any order that has a delivery date in March or later is considered open. Makes sense. The order date has to be within the period, and this is probably the wrong assumption, because of course if the sales order date should be less than or equal to max date. So this condition is correct. We should consider, so this is a condition, so the calculation it is implementing is how many orders are open at the end of the period, so at the end of the month if we have a month. But by adding this condition, it is also including only those orders that have been originated in that month. Let's see the description. So this expression counts the number of rows in sales that have okay, indicating that the order is still open. Makes sense. Okay, so I mean, I can try this calculation. This calculation probably works. So let's duplicate this page, and let's remove something from this one. I can keep Netherlands, and I can add the measure open orders count and see what happens if I include the measure here. Okay, and the problem of this approach is that it is only counting the number of orders that are open at the end of the month at the end of the period, but these are orders that have been generated in that period. Now for the year, probably it makes sense because in the model we have, I think the delivery date has an average between 5 or 10 days. So we don't have any order that crosses 2 years. But if I drill down at the day level, then I should see that this is quite interesting, because you see that at the level of a single day, we have 0 open orders, which is impossible because all the orders have at least 1 day of delivery date. So for example, the order received on the 23rd of May have been delivered later. And so I know that this is impossible. There should be at least one order. I don't know how many orders we have here, but at least one order should be still open at the date. So it's clear that it is not counting the orders that have been made before. Now I'm trying to think, because if I do the teacher, I can explain what the error is, but I want to play the role of the user, and I can say that by looking at the data, looking at the result, it seems that only orders placed in the selected period are considered, whereas we should also include orders made in previous periods and not delivered by the end of the selected period. So let's say that I'm playing the role of the user that look at the data and tries to describe what is the result of the data observed, and see whether it changes the code so that it fixes the problem, or, as we've seen before, it goes in a completely different direction. So in this case, it is getting the date table filter in the date table less than or equal to max date. So this makes sense. This makes sense. I mean, yeah, because this way, so even though, I mean, it would have been better to just filter one column, to be honest, but there is no need to write a filter for the entire table. But the difference should be minimal. So let's try to fix the code this way. And if you remember, we said that the calculation now at least is more meaningful, and I can say that it works if we consider as an open order an order that is open at the end of the period selected. So if I go to the pattern, we are implementing this pattern. So you see that there are several cases. So for example, if I select 1 month, we are considering as open orders the order like the number 3 we see here, for example. This is an open order. And all the other orders are not considered open, right? There could be algorithm where you want to consider an average day by day, for example. So that will mean to compute a so there are different techniques, but imagine we want to include order 2, order 3, and order 5. So I want to count the orders that have been open during that month at least 1 day. So this is the idea. So if the order was open at least 1 month within, 1 day within the month, I want to consider it. This is quite difficult, to be honest, because I don't think that, but let's try, because it is not using, once again, it is not using the code from DAX pattern, because the code in DAX pattern would have used a completely different approach, mainly for performance reasons. But let's see what happens if I change the requirement and say, okay, but I would like to count the average number of orders. Now let's the number of orders that have been open at least 1 day in the selected period, because this is quite difficult. So I think that this is, I mean, I will be very surprised. As I said, I didn't try this before, so I have no idea about what is going on. But let's see. Let's see what happens. It's funny that it's saying that this code is SQL, whereas it is DAX, but that's fine. So the syntax highlighting probably is the one of SQL, I don't know. So get the minimum, get the maximum, and count rows says, yeah, this is completely wrong now, because I don't even try this code, because this code is creating a materialization of the sales table, which is the fact table that has 20 million rows, and then it is counting the number of transactions instead of counting the number of orders that are open. In the previous code, actually we had the same problem. I missed this also before. I took it for granted that this code would have been a distinct count of the order number. And I just realized that there was a big issue at the beginning. I didn't check it. And we are counting the number of transactions, not the number of open orders. Because we want to count the number of open orders, if we have an order that has 4 transactions with the same order ID, we have 4 instead of 1. So my fault. I didn't check before. So okay. So wait, there was an error before. Go back to the previous measure and fix it. It is counting the number of rows in sales and not the number of unique orders. I missed the most important thing, which is the number of unique orders. This was the important thing. Count the number of unique orders have been opened within the selected period. You can modify the previous measure as follows. Open orders count. Distinct count says already. Okay, this makes sense. And this is a very bad idea. Very bad idea. Filter a table with a distinct count is something I will not do, because otherwise it will take forever. And And it is using the logic that I didn't analyze in detail. So it is using the logic that says the order date has to be less than or equal to the max date in selection, and there should be delivery date blank, which is the condition the order is still open in the future, but the order has been made in the past or within the period. Same thing here, and delivery date greater than or equal to the minimum. Yes, because this well, yeah. No, it makes sense. I mean, it's not the average. It's not the average of the order. I would say, okay, the number that we get is wrong, but at least is a meaningful number, so it's not completely random. The issue is that if I try to execute this code, it is just too slow. So I'm thinking what I want to do now, because now I probably went in a confusion because I also asked two different things, and we tried to ask for this. So probably, so this correction, if I asked this correction before, probably I would have got the right code before. So I assume that that would have been possible to fix, even though I should have realized that the code was wrong, providing hints to fix it. In this case, this is not the average. So if I ask the average, no, actually I didn't ask the average. I asked the number of orders that have been open at least one day. Let me check my question. So I would like to count the number of orders that have been open at least one day in the selected period. Well, let's try to fix the performance issue. So the code could work. I'm a little bit a teacher now, but it's too slow. Let's see if it, because in reality it would be enough to just change, remove the filter. If you remove the filter and you apply column filters to the dates, that would be enough. And this is going to be weird. So now it is getting the order IDs before the last period. Then it's getting the order IDs from within. These are the order IDs. The orders before selection, this is correct. The order within the selected period that have been closed, that have been delivered after the beginning of the period, which is this condition. This makes sense. And the orders before selection, the orders that have been open before, but this is the same condition we have here, and this is okay, this is blank. I just don't understand what it's doing. And then it's doing a union, but it is not using the orders before selection. Oh, this is orders before selection is not used. So what's the point of this? And it is doing the union of the orders within the selected period, and then it counts the rows. So I don't understand why it included this code. This is not an efficient way to perform this calculation. But there is another issue. So in case the two sets were overlapping, for example, if the same order ID was present here and here, union does not remove the duplicated value. So this could be an issue, but it is not an issue because in this case we have is blank, and in this case we have delivery date greater than or equal to, which means that they are mutually exclusive by delivery date. So this should not be a problem. So probably this code works. I'm a little bit concerned about the performance. So let's try. So because the performance depends on the number of cells where we evaluate this amount. If I keep this list with just a number, one row per year, the performance could be not too bad. We just have to fix this with the order number. So let's fix this order number instead of order ID. And as you see, this selection or before selection is never used. Order within selected period is used here. Order of your selection is here, yes. And unique open order is used here. So this is completely useless. Anyway, I mean, if I remove this, the code is still working. So let's go. And if I see this number potentially is correct. Let me try to open this. Well, yeah, because the number of orders we have is not too big after these changes, so the performance is not too bad. We can also go to the level. I was expecting, oh, because we are filtering Netherlands, yes, this is the reason. If I didn't filter a country, that would have been much slower. I mean, it works, but order before selection is useless. Well, I mean, it's a good result, to be honest. So why did you include if you don't reference it? So let's see if it fixes the code by removing that variable that is useless. And yeah, that works. So actually, I have to say that I'm quite impressed so far because I see big improvements. It is something that you might not be able to use if you don't know what it's doing. So you have to be able to understand the code that is written, and you have to be able to interpret the code. So the other point is that we're using exactly the same model that he's used to see. I have no idea about what happens if we use a completely different model with different table names, different relationships. That could be more difficult to interpret. So this could be the topic for another Unplugged. I'm quite impressed. So let's do some consideration at the end. So what can I say? I'm quite impressed. I think I have seen many improvements compared to the previous versions of ChatGPT, and in general, it's interesting to see how it can translate my prompt into something that more or less can work. The issue, of course, is that it's an engine that doesn't understand DAX, doesn't understand a data model, and it is just trying to put together patterns that are found on internet in something that produces a code that maybe eventually works after you try to fix it or to provide the errors, and it changes the definition and it generates something that potentially works. I'm impressed because at the end of the day, I didn't see the errors I was used to see in previous versions, in previous tests I made. Especially, I didn't see the arrogance of the engine trying to be confident of the answers. Probably my initial prompt saying keep it short, as short as possible, helped to not having conversation that was just useless for the code that we used. The code is oftentimes not correct the first time. Probably the fact that I'm using Contoso is a big help. It would be interesting to see with a completely different model and a completely different environment how it works. It could be an interesting idea to explore how to create a prompt that describes the model so that the engine knows the names of the entities and try to replace, because actually when we asked to do a sort of refactoring of the code, it worked even though it was very, very easy. So if it is possible to map the tables that we have in the model into the tables that we have in Contoso, probably the engine could work better. But that's a challenge. I have no idea, and that could be the topic for a future Unplugged if you like this one, to move into an area where we don't have the same names, we don't have the same entities, and we actually change on some more complex function, more complex calculation that is not easy to find on internet. Because so far today we only use the queries that probably we would have found, and we probably would have found an article or a question in some forum with the very same description and probably the same code or something very similar. I'm not saying that the code is copied and pasted. It clearly is not. There is a work behind the scene to adapt the code to certain requirements I described. I noticed that, but It's also an engine that doesn't know DAX in depth, doesn't know the syntax of DAX, doesn't understand the idea of the context transition. As we have seen before, it was iterating a column instead of a table, and of course we try to go in a better direction, because my attitude was very positive. If I wanted to, I don't know, to get always wrong answers, it would have been very easy, because guiding the prompt in the wrong direction probably generates code that cannot work, right? Because we know that I know the rules of DAX. I try to keep it simple, but of course, if you specify the question in a more intricate way, I guess it's easy to get wrong answers, as we have seen at the beginning when I just introduced the weekday. Even though I have to say, also in that case, there was a working solution we have been able to find. Not at the first guess, not at the first prompt, and guiding the engine with some hint, right? Because we try not to be very explicit in the error from a technical perspective, but also from a user point of view, I try to be helpful, to provide information that would have been helpful if I had in a call a technician on the other, or a consultant on the other line of the phone, and on the other side of the line, sorry, to try to help in writing the DAX code. So that's the approach that probably pays better with this engine, like also with consultants. But it's interesting. It's interesting to see the evolution, where the evolution goes, and of course, we will do other Unplugged videos if you like this one about ChatGPT, but the idea again is to explore what is the possibility without having bias about that. I try to not have bias. I think that it is not ready to be used by users that don't know DAX, but of course, if as an exercise, as an experiment, is quite interesting and quite impressive, the evolution we had in the last few months. Enjoy DAX.